Tonight on Nation to Nation, National Chief RoseAnne Archibald wants to put internal strife in the past as the Assembly of First Nations charts a path forward. I'm Brett Forster. Welcome to Nation. RoseAnne Archibald has hit the ground running following her historic win as AFN National Chief. From lobster boats on the front lines of the fight for Mi'kmaq fishing rights to the former Kamloops residential school, ground zero for the discovery of unmarked graves where she joined the Prime Minister earlier this week. It's been a busy 3 months for the National Chief, but she joins me from British Columbia to discuss what's next. National Chief Archibald, welcome to Nation.
Thank you, Brett. Happy to be here.
So what have you taken away from visiting all these communities?
Well, when I was elected, I developed a 100-day plan, and that 100-day plan was about trying to have as many actions and successes that I could in my first 100 days. And that included visiting as many communities as I could. My goal was to get to all of the regions and as many communities in all of those regions. But because of the pandemic, I just wasn't able to get to the Yukon or Northwest Territories or Alberta. But I did get to the majority of the regions. And being in communities for me is really important. It's about connecting to the leadership, connecting to people in communities, and really getting an understanding on what's happening on the ground today. As leaders, we're well versed in the issues that face our people. And for me, having a connection into communities and understanding them and hearing them is a really important part of my work moving forward. So we did, for example, there is going to be now a resolution coming forward to establish a 2SL LGBTQIA plus council that will come in December. That was a part of my platform. I also talked a lot about women's issues in my platform, and we were very fortunate to have written a proposal and secured funding to start an elected women's leadership council at the AFN, a women's caucus. We raised $6.2 million for that, and a lot of that, and half of that funding will actually go into the regions so that they can carry on that developmental work around ensuring that women's voices are heard, and that their priorities are actioned on as women leaders. And so the other things that I've done in the first 100 days is obviously dealing with the former institutions of assimilation and genocide. I don't call them schools anymore. And, having to deal with the recovery of our little ones and talking to the government on the path forward. We did have a resolution, for example, on a international rapporteur to do an impartial investigation into this matter. But what we ended up from the government was a commitment for an interlocutor, so an internal process. So there's still a lot of work to be done there around the issue of the recovery of our children. And I've also spent a lot of time trying to create healthy boundaries between the political and administrative arms at the AFN. That was also in my platform. And I'm hoping that we'll be having, some discussion in December with the chiefs on that, and that we'll hopefully have a resolution on how to proceed to make the AFN a healthy, safe place to work. So that's kind of like a summary of some of the things that I've been working on. And you're right, I wanted to hit the ground running. And I think what's important also that we've done is I've really talked about the healing path forward a lot. And most recently, we developed a draft accord and presented it to the Prime Minister while we were to Kamloops together. And so that's going to be a big part of the truth and reconciliation process moving forward. And, we did have what was called the Memorandum of Understanding with the federal government, which is the political bilateral mechanism. It's a permanent bilateral mechanism, and we've got to update that and change it. But, there's a lot happening. There's the papal visit. There are going to be a number of our people going to Rome. As I said previously, I won't be going, but Regional Chief Yakalaya is going on behalf of the Executive Council as a portfolio holder to, of course, invite the Pope to meet that call for him to apologize here on Turtle Island.
Yeah.
So those are the things I've
Yeah,
been up to.
there's a lot happening, and probably or what's happening next will be the announcement of Justin Trudeau's next cabinet. Do you think it's time for some fresh faces at the Indigenous departments?
Yeah, I'm hoping that in this term, we do get to see our first Indigenous minister in either, the Cernak area or ISC. Although I have to tell you, Mark Miller has been a really strong ally as a minister, and I've really appreciated the work he's done. I do believe it's time, though, to see more Indigenous faces in the cabinet. And participating in ministerial roles rather than supporting or parliamentary secretary roles, but really being ministers.
The AFN is often accused, or has been accused in the past, of cozying up with colonial governments. How are you going to handle your relationship with the Liberals going forward?
I've always been a relationship builder, and I'm known to be diplomatic. At the same time, I have to hold space to make sure that this government is accountable. When we think about some of the things that have happened recently, for example, Joyce Echaquan's death, and a number of issues that are rising to the surface, particularly around our children, this government has to be accountable for that, and this government has to take action for that. So I really have to hold space to be two things. One is to be a good partner in the dialogue that we have with government, ensuring that they take action on our issues and move us forward, advance our priorities. And at the same time, to be able to speak the truth to them. Truth is really important during this time of truth and reconciliation. And I focus on truth because it has to be told. People have to be aware of the truth of Canada. And once we can get to that place where we actually look at the real picture of Canada, then we can begin to rebuild the story of Canada and rebuild those relationships and make sure that our inherent in treaty rights, particularly land rights, title rights, water rights, that all of those are respected by this government. So, it's a dual role, and I want to be cooperative and collaborative at the same time. I also have to be very truthful, and sometimes that's difficult in politics. Politics is not known always for the truth, and so I want to hold that space for that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Last week, I had former National Chief Del Riley on the show. He created the modern AFN 40 years ago by bringing in the chiefs, and it has changed very little since then. Where, in your mind, does the AFN need to go as an organization?
This is the work that we're setting out right now. There's a corporation called the National Indian Brotherhood, and it is obliged to uphold corporate and Canadian laws. And we need that for things like funding, facilitate comprehensive agreements with governments. At the same time, that process can't drive the political path forward. There has to be a very strong political voice that the AFN has separately from its administrative role of interfacing with this government. And so to me, that's the real work ahead, is making sure that the organization does address these criticisms. Criticisms are really meant to make us better. So that's what this criticism has always been about the AFN. How do you make an organization relevant? How do you make an organization, I think about all the criticisms, that we have to become a relevant organization. We have to get in touch with people, and we have to be connected to people. And so that's my work as National Chief. This is why I'm going to communities, because I want them to know that I am here as National Chief to support them in their work, to give them a voice nationally, to amplify their voices. This is the message I've been taking to First Nations. And when the AFN fulfills its role, then it becomes a part of the solutions that we have been facing since the inception of this country. And that is hard work. And there will be resistance to that. There will be people who don't want to see those changes, who will try and work against those changes. And that's okay. But the bottom line is that change has happened. It will continue to happen. And we need to have this evolutionary and positive change so that we can support First Nations and their goals and their objectives and create what the vision we all have, which is our children being happy and healthy, surrounded by the love and care of their families in safe and vibrant communities. Every level of our political system has a role in that, and the AFN role needs to be refined and understood and agreed upon.
When you took the reins of the AFN on the topic of reform, you were pushing for a probe into the AFN's financial policies. There were other investigations and allegations into gender-based discrimination, an alleged data breach, and bullying allegations against yourself. I know you called those allegations reprisal, but what is the status on all of those investigations?
The issue around, for example, the issue around investigations is those investigations have concluded. So the data breach investigation has concluded, the HR investigation has concluded. Those have been accepted by the AFN Executive Committee. There was motions passed on those, so those things are in the past. In terms of the path forward, we really need to make sure that we're guided by our principles and guided by our own protocols, not by corporate structure or these kind of legal things that crop up where people lawyer up and, you know, you get into a fight. We have to move beyond that. And that means we need our knowledge keepers to start guiding this organization to make sure that if there are problems, that we're addressing it in a trauma-informed way, and we're also addressing it from the perspective of who we are, which is how do we make sure that collectively we are in harmony with one another? How do we ensure that our relationships are restored every time there is an upset? These are traditional approaches that we have as First Nation Indigenous people, and that's how this organization has to start to move forward. And that's why it's really important to separate this political part of the organization from the administrative part, because the administrative part always wants to lawyer up, always wants to have lawyers involved, always wants to have this confrontational negative space where nothing can move forward. Whereas our traditional ways are to bring people together and to do the healing that we need to do. And that's why I keep talking about the healing path forward. It's not only the healing path forward for Canada, but it's an internal healing path forward that we have to initiate. And I have initiated that work. And it is sensitive, and so you're not hearing a lot in the media, and you won't hear a lot about it because it involves people's feelings, it involves people's work. You know, it's such a sensitive matter, and it's not something that we can be broadcasting, you know, as we go through it. But once we go through that process of healing this organization and having that healing path forward, then we can actually begin to talk about what are the things that we're going to do to make sure that we don't go down those roads again. And I think that this is the work ahead for all of us.
Okay, National Chief, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank you for coming on Nation to Nation.
Thank you, Brett. Good to see you.